Hello and welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us and joining our podcast, our live Facebook podcast. I'm Bianca Edwards. I'm with Sacred Apothecary, and I am joining with Community Change Action and the Black Freedom Collective to bring this episode here to you today. So, today we're being joined by a group of dynamic Black voters across the country who are building power in their communities and really connecting with voters on upcoming election and their vision for the future. So before I introduce those panelists, I want to invite everyone joining us to post your questions, your stories, and your ideas in the chat. We want to urge you to register to vote in the upcoming November election. And I say this because right now we're going through a lot of challenges. We've survived through Black murders across the country. We are surviving right now through police brutality, and we are surviving right now through COVID. And so all of those are heavy things. Black and brown experiences in general are heavy things. And so we want to honor that and honor this space and also honor the brilliance that comes with Black and brown bodies. And so in this space, when we are talking about voting, I'm talking about how powerful it is because states would not be purging voter rolls and there would not be mass communication and confusion in the how, when, and where we vote if it wasn't powerful. We want to make sure that we all show up at the polls and make sure our votes are counted. And we also want to invite you to sign up to be a volunteer to engage your family, your friends, and your community members through voter outreach. So we have a couple different options here at Community Change. And one of them is that if you drop your name and your email in the sign-up sheet that'll be linked in a moment, then you'll be able to join one of our weekly volunteer meetings. The other invitation that we ask you to do is to share a video about what your experience is like being a Black voter in the United States, especially in the America we're in right now. So now I'm going to move us into inviting the afternoon's guests. So we have Teesha Miller from Kansas City. Teesha is the CEO of Youth Ambassadors. She's an impassioned social advocate working to inspire social, economic, and environmental change by helping underrepresented youth become future leaders and advocates for themselves in social justice arenas. Teesha holds an undergraduate degree in management, has 2 master's degrees, an MHA and an MBA, and she holds a graduate certificate in pediatric bioethics from UMKC School of Medicine, and is currently, and I'm so proud about this, is currently a doctoral student pursuing a terminal degree in instructional design and performance technology. So in other words, she's pretty baller. What appeals most to Teesha is the ability to address alarming trends in violence, suicidal ideology, and substance use among our teens and our communities. And so all of this brilliance that she has going towards really paying attention not only the attacks on our community and culture, but also on the facets that are eroding our family units. And how do we heal and repair those things? How do we uplift those stories? Next, I'm going to bring on Jazz Jordan, and Jazz is from Atlanta. Jazz is a 15-year resident who is the president of the Lakewood Action Team. It's a group that expedites community change in South Atlanta. So another amazing person. Jazz is a world traveler, and I need some of these stories on top of that, but is also the founder of Jazz in the Park and does a lot of work with American Youth Hostels and has the Jazz on the Park Hostel in New York City, which I am so curious about. Jazz is a true believer in giving good energy and receiving it tenfold. And I'm sure that you will see that in the energy he brings on our show today. Lastly, I want to invite in Janiah Miller from Cincinnati. Janiah just recently graduated from NKU, which is Northern Kentucky University, where she studied political science, social justice, and university honors. And she focused on women and gender studies and public service. Janiah's passion for local government started while serving as an intern on Yvette Simpson's mayoral campaign and as an aide to Simpson's city council office. Janiah is passionate about politics and advocacy work and holds a deep appreciation for community engagement. She's a 2020 New Leaders Council Fellow, serves as the coordinator, I know, right? Serves as the coordinator for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Charter Amendment. And if you guys should be proud of me because I said that all in one mouthful. And is a member of the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition, is a member of the Black United Front Leaders of the Free World, and is a member of the Read Newport's Educational Task Force. So I want to offer a warm welcome to all 3 of you. I'm so excited to be here with you. And thank you for joining us, all of you out there who are viewing, as we find new ways to build the Black power of women, people, and families in our communities. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. So now that I've done the formal introduction, I would love if each of you take a minute to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and share with us what you're currently thinking about the November 2020 election. With everything that's happening, what are you feeling right now? How are you feeling about the election?
Well, I'd like to say again, thank you for having me. My name is Teesha Miller. I appreciate the warm welcome. I'm feeling a bit concerned about the November election. Um, I'm concerned about delays, absentee ballots counting, moving and changing of polling stations, and voters being purged from the rolls. We had an incident in the spring election where our own mayor showed up at the polling station and his name was not there. It was quickly remedied. He tweeted about it, and they fixed it. It was an oversight. But if the mayor can experience that type of foul interaction at the polling station, what might happen to a 19-year-old or a 25-year-old or a senior citizen? So I'm concerned. I don't put anything past this administration, and I want everyone to be galvanized in the community and coming out and vote.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Jazz, what about you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jazz Jordan. I live here in South Atlanta, which I live about 1 mile away from the Wendy's where Rashad Brooks was shot. And also Sequoia Turner. I'm also about 1 mile in the other direction away from the Southview Cemetery where John Lewis was buried. And I'm also in the middle of Atlanta where there are long lines for people to vote, and many people can't get absentee ballots. And I'm definitely concerned about what's going to happen with this election, seeing what's happened already here. This is definitely a hotbed of what could go wrong. If you want to know what could go wrong, if you zoom in on Atlanta, this is where people just looking at how they're bringing kids back to school now. So this is definitely what not to do. And so I'm hoping we can get to a point where they can we can start leading and showing people what they should do.
Yeah, and I know, Jazz, earlier you had mentioned that there were lines of close to 500 people. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Just down the street from you in our polling area. I voted early, but there were 500 people lined up around the block. And I passed by maybe half an hour later, and the same people were in the same position. And there are always problems with the machines, and it's just kind of, I mean, can you imagine what's going to be like on election day? I mean, not to jump ahead, but just imagine if you're in line for election day, and someone coughs in line.
Yeah.
Okay, which would have meant nothing now can change everything.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And Janiah, what about you? How are you feeling?
I'm also feeling, anxious, nervous, similar to everyone else. But I know a lot of what I've also been thinking about lately has to do with, Vice President Biden's vice president is going to be. Just because I feel like if, we had did a restart button or this election, this primary season had been pushed back a little bit, he wouldn't have been like our nominee. I think it made me think deeper about how powerful like respectability politics are, and really how, in 2018, we won back the House. We won back the House because of women of color, because of Black women coming out and voting. And I feel like that's not recognized enough. I'm always hearing this narrative, oh, 1 million Black people didn't vote in 2016, but it's like 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. But like the narrative is always on what Black people aren't doing and what Black people should be doing when we are showing up and we are doing our part. And so I'm tired of us being taken advantage of. I feel like Biden got the nominee because of older Black people largely. And so I feel like it is not selfish or problematic to expect that he choose a Black woman to be vice president. We deserve to be in leadership just as much as the next person. And I really think the future of this party is more diverse, and it's younger, and it's more women led. And so I think thinking about that too, in this whole deep stakes madness too, is something to think about too, because who he chooses for VP really could also set the tone for how and when people want to go out and vote too.
Right. Yeah, and I see head nods coming from Teesha, and Jazz is like, yep. So moving from that space and knowing that that's in the center of all the things that we're experiencing and really struggling with, what is your story for each of you around why you vote and why your story motivates you?
I feel like I'm always going first, and that's kind of okay with me. Like Jazz is hanging back, like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say something, and Janiah is being all, nice and politically correct. I'm excited about this question about why I vote, because I feel like my vote makes a difference. Mm-hmm. I also feel like if I do not vote, I do not have the right to complain. If I'm going to participate in the process, then that earns me the right later on to complain about how the process goes or what does or does not come of it. So a part of my passion from this also surrounds heated fellowships or conversations with people who do not vote.
Okay.
They complain.
Yeah.
They do not vote, yet they complain about society structures, systems, oppression, oppressive policies, but you don't exercise the rights that are afforded to you to be able to make some changes in that area. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bianca. What were you saying?
No, you're walking all into it. I was asking, what do you mean by that? What does that heat?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'll keep going. And that is what I mean by that. I've had I've had the privilege, I'll say, to be able to utilize some services based upon the lives that my husband and I provided for ourselves and our family. So when we needed it, we could go to receive different services based on what we've already paid into the system. Conversely, others have access to some services based on votes and policies that were placed into effect so that you could receive some services without having paid for them or without having to necessarily have the resources to get that. In order to maintain some of those things, you have to exercise, I feel like, your right to vote. If not, you lose the right to complain later. Maybe, that's just how I feel. Jazz said, so I don't know what that means.
Oh, no, I agree. I was because what you were saying sounded a little coded. I had my decoder ring, but I knew what you were saying.
Well, and I feel like right now, and I'm hearing this too as well, Teesha, that right now we are at risk of losing all of that. We're at risk of losing all of our social supports. We're at risk of losing childcare benefits. We're at risk of losing more of our health care. And we also are at risk of having people deported. And one thing that we've experienced in a lot of the cities in the country, counties around the United States, is this experience where if you are of dark skin, or if you have brown skin, or if you are ambiguously or unambiguously Black, it doesn't matter. If you're brown, no matter where you are in this country, you are at risk of losing not only your life, but all of your services, all of your ability to actually feel safe and create safety. And even try and define that in this space where right now, not only are we at risk of police brutality, but everything is being taken away. People are literally going missing.
For sure.
And we know that they're not actually missing. They're being held in a cage or being killed, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're at risk of losing all of those things.
And I have personal experience with that. As many of you know, my husband recently battled with cancer. Mm-hmm. And we were admitted to the hospital right before COVID, became declared as a pandemic. And when it did, I was told at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, you're leaving this hospital. So, and mind you, in a part of that story, there had been no less than 7 near misses with his hospital care, right? So exactly. So no, I'm not leaving. I thought I was going to be drug out, and I wasn't. But the point being is, where do the line of what we have access to and what we have a right for, who can be by your side to advocate for you when you can't for yourself, until that touches your family. You don't want to wait until that touches your family directly. We want to make sure that protections are in place right now so that should you need them or never need them, you or a loved one or even someone you don't know will have access to policies, procedures, help, and even health care that would take you, that could cost you your life.
Yeah.
You know, by the same token, I just gave my 20-year-old son a speech yesterday because he was driving said husband's car. He's 20 years old in a Lexus LS 430. No, go directly to where you're going, observe the laws, do the speed limit. And if, God forbid, you should get pulled over, start video recording, even though we both know that we all know that the video sometimes matters not, because they still haven't arrested Breonna Taylor's
Murder. Right. Why do you feel like we have to give, and this is for everyone too, since we're on this vein, why do we feel like we have to give those types of speeches and conversation and have those conversations with our children? Why is that even a factor?
I feel like it's the only way, it's one of the only ways that we're even acknowledging some of the injustice that's going on from a more personal way. It's always, you know, like I mean, most people I know someone who's been murdered, whether it be police brutality or whether it be neighborhood violence, but it often feels very taboo to talk about because it's very painful. And so when you have those conversations as a mother or as a sister or with whoever, you're recognizing that collective pain, because I feel like Black pain isn't, you know, viewed as something that it's just something that we should feel. Like I often feel like some white people will be like, oh, like this person, like, you know, Tamir Rice, he's killed. Like I had this white woman was like, oh, wasn't that one of the ones we learned from? And it was like, what do you like mean by that? It's like his his sister was like tackled in that instance, like, and all those other things like that causes PTSD. It's not just when you bury the person, it's like the lifelong impact that it has. So back to that conversation, that allows you to feel some sort of validation that we're not getting because we don't have support groups for police brutality. We don't have support groups for neighborhood violence or support groups just for being Black.
Right. And there's a comment here that this is life or death. And that's really where we're at. We're at life or death right now. It's not an if this could happen, what could our response be? It's this has been happening for generations. Our people have been hunted, gunned down, and murdered for generations. And it's in our bodies, it's in our DNA. It shows up when we are having these conversations with our children. We are having these conversations with our children before they're even born. You know, I can honestly remember when my daughter was in my womb and having conversations with her around, I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe. And I hope that doesn't mean that my life has to end, but if it does, so that you can live and you can thrive and you can survive, that's what I'm going to do, because it's that important to me that I birth you into a space that means thriving. That doesn't mean that your breath for going off on an officer, for going off on somebody in a mall, for whatever you experience isn't going to be the last one you take. That you are going to be allowed to hold your pain in a way that's healthy and to hold your joy in a way that brings more and invites more in and also shows up with those you love and care about. So I thank you all. Jazz, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, no, it's definitely important. I've learned as a Black man in America what it really means to be a Black man in America. I'm 6'4", and if you could, I never really had people. I usually were in more multicultural areas where it didn't really matter. But when I moved down here, I became very aware that my stature is threatening to me. And not just this other faces, but our own faces. You see me coming your way like, oh boy, here he comes. What's he gonna do? And I never knew so much about how the police, interacting with the police, could be a very unpleasant situation. I was pulled over once here in Atlanta for not wearing a seatbelt, but I clearly had the seatbelt on. They were pulling me over to check to see what I was doing, and somehow that $15 ticket turned into I didn't respond within 6 weeks, and I was pulled over again for somehow just driving while Black, and that turned into an arrest. And they were trying to hold me for three days, or it'd come up with $1,000. And the people in jail, it was like a homecoming. I had never been surrounded by so much Black love in my life. It was like, oh, you know, they were like, oh, they got you too. What they get you for? And it's like, oh, it was unfortunately one of my better experiences. But the thing that I thought about was like, just imagine if when the police pulled me over and they said I didn't have a seatbelt, and I had the seatbelt on. If I had caused a fuss or made a scene, I could have ended up dead over something that wasn't even my own fault. It's just because I looked like someone who matched the description of someone, a black man in a truck. It's like, and that's good.
I was gonna say, now put your mask on, Jazz. So now you're 6'4".
Oh yeah.
With the face covering.
Yes.
Right? Now you're 6'4" with the face covering. What does that do? Now we all look suspect. You know, by the way, I'm almost 6 feet tall myself. So gosh, we're all suspect now. And that's just what cannot happen.
Can you imagine that I have learned to smile constantly because it makes other people feel comfortable around me? Can you imagine what that type of training is like? Like, I mean, it's unfortunate that has to be said, but your children may not come home if you don't explain to them, like, this unfortunately is how you need to act.
Yeah.
Right.
So
with other counterparts.
Yeah. So with all of what you all just shared and all of where we're sitting, what does that mean for why we vote? What does that mean for our stories around voting? What does voting have the power to do other than change it? What does it mean?
Well, I think it amplifies our voice. Janiah hit the nail on the head when she talked about our voice, the stories that we do not tell. You know, so to some degree, driving over to the poll is like, you're going to hear this today. You're going to see me today. I'm going to be represented today. No matter the level of trust or mistrust we have in the system, it's an act that gives us, at least me, the feeling like I'm participating in change. I'm trying to enact change. It feels like linking arms, you know, especially when I see someone else there, you know, of color. I'm like, yeah, we did it, you know. Yeah. So that, for me, you know, that's what it brings forward, is the feeling that I can enact change and the attempt to try to do so on some level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels like something that's very powerful when you put the paper in and like you cast your vote. And then it also feels even more powerful when you know that Black people, particularly Black women, are the largest voting bloc in the Democratic Party. We're really like carrying elections, we're carrying these parties. So it feels like this different type of power. I know for me personally, it feels, I generally go to the polls with my family. So that feels nice, waiting in line, going to the polls. Like, I'm just like, giving them, like, vote for, because I'm a registered voter in Kentucky, vote for Charles Booker, that type of thing. And I just remember on that day when we were all there, because generally most of me and my siblings, we are lighter skinned. And then when we went out to dinner, or lunch, I should say, afterwards, one of my brother, he's on more of the brown skin side, a little bit darker than us, he starts telling us how he was asked if he lived in like a group home, and like these different questions. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Because I didn't hear that. I wasn't in the room. I was like, what do you mean you were asked that you lived in a group home? And then like there was like a small dialogue going, well, they might have not meant it in a bad way. And I was like, well, a group home implies that you don't have a family, or you don't have someone to live with, or that you're in some sort of trouble. And it's like off-putting that, he's the only one that's asked that. And so for me, that felt like almost a form of like voter suppression, because that could really turn someone off for even like wanting to vote. Like, what do you mean by that? And it could cause like an argument. Like, it didn't cause an argument with him, but it makes us really think about like how even going out and voting, you can experience like such microaggressions. And just thinking about, how the Voting Rights Act, the key parts were like gutted in 2013, and how it's more important than ever to even show up to vote, to flip the Senate back so we can restore those parts in the Voting Rights Act. So there's a lot of things that I think about when it comes to voting and its power, because it's really the number one way I think an individual can really be democratic in society.
Yeah. And one thing that I love that you said earlier, and you also said in our interview, like, you guys make it a whole family affair. Like, y'all go out to lunch and afterward, or dinner, depending on what time you vote. Like, your grandma is the first one that took you to vote. All of that stuff is really powerful to like actually bake it into our generational pieces, right? To make it a family.
We're taking pictures. Like my sister for Christmas, not this Christmas, the last Christmas, like they're not even really into voting in politics and things like I am, but she got me a picture of me, her, and my grandma like voting. We had like our sticker on, and then she had this card like, I know you wanted the big blue wave, and we got it. So I was like
Awesome.
a little Christmas gift.
Well, to tag on to what Janiah was saying, it's kind of like when you were asking about why do I vote. My grandparents were sharecroppers, and they kind of, which is basically a form of modern day slavery. And I know that their vote was always suppressed. It was always not encouraged for them to go out and vote. And maybe a month ago, I was out with a friend. We were walking through Piedmont Park. We had our mask on and everything. It was early in the morning, not many people around. And she was explaining to me why she didn't like either of the candidates that were in the election. And she figured that she would just write my name down as her choice. And this friend is an educator. And I remember thinking, this is the least educated thing that I've ever heard someone say to me. And I stopped her and I said, you don't know, this is the same thing that happened in 2016. People were like, well, I don't like Hillary. I don't like any of the choices out there. My voice is not being heard. And so I'm not going to vote. And because of that, we're in the situation that we're in now. And I was like, I had to bring it home for her. I'm like, well, look, you're a teacher here in Georgia, and they're going to send you back to school as a frontline essential worker. And you have pre-existing conditions, and you will basically be putting your life on the line. So you can either vote or literally die.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to see the connection in her eyes where she's realizing what she had said to me, it was still, I mean, and I think if this is an educator, just how many other people are feeling the same way. And I'm really hoping, as Janiah was saying, that this vice president choice is someone that can electrify a community to come out and vote, or at least mail in a vote, something.
Yeah. And not even just electrify them. I think the place that I'm sitting in is we have, and I'll be very frank, there's so many white men in power. And we talk a lot about toxic masculinity in some of the spaces that I'm in. And how do we move from a toxic masculine space to a centered balance, whether it's male or female, to a centered balance space where the one and the only, Black people and brown people are the most marginalized in this country. How do we lift up that voice and not only lift it up in the voting spaces, and not only show up and be more represented by being people that can be voted for, but then how do we even take it a step farther and say, like, if we're going to put somebody in this VP seat, it needs to be somebody that not only represents us and have been through similar experiences, but then can also say, no, that policy doesn't make sense because that's going to cause further harm to our communities. Instead of that, we're going to do this and really listen to the voters, because right now we have a lot of men in power that can't actually honor that they've even had pain. And so if you can't honor your own pain, how can you honor someone else's? What does that look like? Is that even possible? And so I'm even sitting in that question of how do we recognize that if we have people that are denying their own pain, how do we even then expect them to see us? One of my really good friends, who I actually haven't spoken to in a little while and need to touch base with, shared with me at one point. He said, Bianca, it's like I'm drinking poison waiting for the other person to die. I'm watching them hoping that they're going to be the ones that go, but I'm drinking the poison. And so even sitting in that space of like, what are we doing in voting spaces? Are we drinking other people and waiting for them to be the ones to die? Or are we the ones who are going to be able to take a breath and create space for other people to vote, to be able to show up, to feel safe enough to do that? Because right now, safety is one of the biggest things. In Cincinnati, we sometimes have police and sheriff deputies at our polling locations. Right. And with a lot of systems, the way they're set up not to protect us, not to protect people that look like us. And so with all the tension and all the stress and all the experiences of COVID, what is that going to mean for when people show up? And like one of you said earlier, somebody coughs in line and someone else may get triggered by that or freak out or scream or yell or get angry. How are we being safe with each other? How do we say, hey, look, we can't get angry, we can't rationalize, we can't jump and fight on people, and we still have to be protected?
You said a lot there, Bianca. And I want to start by saying, I think, and I give very few nods to the current person residing in the White House. But I can say the one thing that I think that that election has proven is that anybody can do it. Anybody can get voted for it. And so for that, I think it takes that that lid off of our community that only a certain person can hold that office. And I think, for argument's sake, only a certain person should, and the current person should not. But at any rate, but it does open up the option of possibilities to the community. And I think also, unfortunately, the violence that we have seen in our community has lit a fire in our community, unlike any others that we've seen before, that says there's something that we have to do about it. And what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And so your organization and organizations like this who are creating these conversations, my hope and prayer is that it's out here on social media so that it will be liked and shared and it will continue, but that it also happens around the dinner table, whatever that looks like. It happens in the cars, on the way to work or working from home, whatever that looks like. I saw in the chat, someone said, how do we light a fire in the younger generation to cause them to vote? And I can personally attest that I'm looking through the chat, and several of the people in this chat are younger generation. I can see that they are people from the organization that I serve. And so that I think that their fire is lighting. We have Janiah on the panel. I don't mean to be, is age just a word? I don't mean to presume what her age might be, but this is representative. I'm 48. I'm just going to put it out there. This is representative, I think, of the cross section of society. And I think this is showing that we're ready for a change. We're well positioned for a change, and we have it well within our grasp. All we have to do is exercise the right to vote. Register, bring your person with you, find out where those polls and places are, because mine changed. I got the letter the day after. But nonetheless, we have to answer some of what your question was. How do we do this? This is how we do it. It's one of the legal mechanisms we can use to enact change.
Yeah.
So,
And you actually, go ahead, Janiah.
oh, sorry. I was gonna say, well, yes, I am. I'm 22 years old. So I was gonna say, I think that this moment is very different. I think when we think back about what's been done already, I think we think like, okay, there's been, the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, those are policy, those are laws, those are systemic change. I think people are starting to think more about, okay, the economic mobility side of things. Like it's not just like, the police accountability. It's also, housing, Black people losing their homes because areas are getting gentrified. So the capital that we do have, we're being lost to it because we can't keep up with the property tax. And so I think a lot of young people, outside of being Black, being young, being a senior citizen, you're more likely to be voter suppressed. But it's thinking we already have the power. We're in the streets. Our age demographic is likely to be the ones out protesting. When we think about civil rights giants, Fred Hampton murdered at 21, John Lewis, he was young. In that, so really thinking about that collective power and really changing like that narrative, like, okay, I want to run for public office. What does that look like for me? How do I get this access? Regardless, you don't have to be a political science major to do a political internship because, in my school, we just learned, we have the three branches of government. So I thought you could only get stuff done at the federal level until I went to college. It was like, no. And then I did this internship and I was like, a lot of things are done locally. That's like close to home. So do that summer internship, even if you're just, doing calls, phone banking, or marching in a parade. Do that and see what that's like. And you might be interested in it because we really do need to understand how these different systems of power and oppression work if we want to begin to dismantle them or reimagine what they look like. Because I guess I'll leave with this point is that you're not just voting for the member. That's one thing that I learned when I was on an internship in Congress. You are also voting for the staff too.
Yeah.
And so you want to vote for someone who will be reflective of you. And so, if the whole staff is white, then they're likely not to, they might not care about Black issues, or
Consider.
might not think about that because they don't have to. And I know people who
Mhm.
interned in Congress who staff said racist thing, like nobody cares about Harriet Tubman in the state, like that type of deal. And it's just like those are the staff that's influencing, the member. And I think it's really interesting as a staff for political candidate and city hall. It's just like, oh wow, I really do have all this influence on, like, let's support this charter amendment for affordable housing. Let's get these meetings set up. So I guess really in a nutshell, it's really like, let's reclaim our power and let's be in spaces that we might not even think that we need to be in. Just go there and see what it's like, versus like, is this space really for me?
Right. And you both led us into this last question of what's all possible when we do vote. And jump in. Tifa, you look ready.
No, Jazz got this. Jazz got this.
Can I double back real quick? I just wanted to mention one of the reasons that I was trying to be quiet because one of the groups that I'm a part of, the Lakewood Heights Action Team, is actually mainly strong Black women and their ideas. I'm pretty much a figurehead because it's been proven that if a Black female were to say the same thing that I'm saying, people find it better and more interesting when I say it. And it's not true, even if it's that person's idea. And there's so many people that are hijacking Black women and women of color's ideas. The Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, who started it? And, it's a whole line that goes down. And it's kind of, it's just important that this by having a Black female vice president can suddenly make people realize, oh, wow, yes, I see an example, and this is the person that I need to listen to. And, somehow I believe that they'll make more sense than Biden. I mean, just a chance, 99%. So it's kind of like for people to see an example suddenly changes their view, because, you watch TV, these shows, they never have a Black female as president. They just now were being cutting edge to put a Black male as president. And then and suddenly we had a Black president, a Black male president. So the thing is, it's really to get that into people's psyche that these ideas are coming from this place, and and we need to get behind this so that we can move ahead. It's something, that particular part really bothers me, that a man's voice, a Black man's voice, could be more important than a Black woman's voice. I mean, but a white man's voice will cancel us all out.
Yep.
If he's saying the craziest thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I'll say something that may be a little controversial, but I'll say it anyway. Someone once said to me, and this person is somebody that I hold very dear. They said to me that the system was always set up to protect white women, so they actually have the most power. And that was something that I'm still marinating in. I'm still sitting around questions. And the way they framed it to me, and the reason they framed it to me, is because we were processing a lot of internalized trauma and generational trauma. And when you think about why there were law enforcement created, was because of slaves. It was to catch slaves and bring them back. But then even it was because there was the possibility that a white woman would be raped. And that if she was raped by a Black man that was a slave, then we had to protect her. And I use we as in white males and white family. And so for a system that was created for that express reason, whether it's true or false, that's a lot of what we were struggling through. And what we've experienced is, even when that person said that to me, like I said, I'm still marinating in it. But that was the comment that was made, that a lot of the reasons that our systems are set up are not because of power necessarily. It's because they needed to protect white women. And so with that, I do want to loop us back to the question of what's all possible when we vote, but also know that, like, that's marinating in the back of my mind as you all share your stories.
Yes, because I know when I ask people questions, so what do you want to happen, especially about people, what do you want to happen? And they're telling me, then they redirected, this is what I think will happen. No, I asked, what do you want to happen? And so I think, and it's just like this dumbfoundedness, like, no, if you want something, then let's advocate for that. Let's push for that, because I really think, like, Black people we just don't want to survive. We just don't want to live, but we just want to be able to thrive. When I'm walking up the steps at night, I don't want to look back at the window, like the door, and think like, think about Breonna Taylor, like that could happen to me, that could happen to my mom. It's really us being able to be free and us being able to be safe, because when we think about policing, similar to what Bianca said, it's really to stop Black people from truly being free. If we address things like systemic racism, poverty, those things, then we don't need police officers flooding our neighborhoods, because we actually have access and resources. And so that control and that power gets taken away from us, and that's why they bomb Black Wall Street and things of that nature. So we just don't feel that. And I think when Jazz was talking about Black women voice and inspiration and what that would mean if they were number two, I do think it would have a significant impact, because when Senator Kamala Harris was running, you see white little girls with that same glassy look in their eyes, like, "Oh, I can be in this role too." And I really think, I don't know, I really think it's about Black people fully being able to dream, and not just being in a nightmare, not just being able to um just accept what we're given.
Yeah.
So
One thing, oh, sorry, Janiah. One thing you had said to me that really stuck is that you said our liberation is collective. And you even talked about some of the educational and housing systems and how, for you, if I'm framing it correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things you said that really stuck with me too is that it means you won't be afraid of getting a call about your brother being gunned down. And you had shared that earlier story about your brother at the voting location. And so for me, that really hits home around what's possible when we vote is we won't have to have these conversations, to Teesha's point, around our children acting a certain way, holding themselves, speaking, using specific language, driving a certain way, only being able to go to where you need to go and come straight back. Because what is assumed of what it means to be Black and what that means you can and can't do.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I just feel like the pain and the weight Black people carry is not valued. Like, I'm pretty sure, I would guess that all four of us know someone who's been murdered, and it's probably been a Black male, where I'm just astonished when I hear. I remember I was talking to like a 40-year-old white male last year, and he was saying, like, I don't know anybody who was murdered. And I'm like, how? Like, I knew someone like coming out of the womb, like my dad's best friend was murdered, who he was living with right when I was just born. And that, that night he was at work. So it's just thinking about that and just our own safety. And that's why, I don't know, these conversations are important, because I don't think people who are not Black can even begin to imagine what public safety looks like for us, because I think Black men particularly are so close to death, particularly when it comes to gun violence.
Right. Yeah. Teesha and Jazz, I see you guys shaking your head. Where are you sitting with that question of what's possible?
Well, I'm going to take the opportunity to go ahead and go first, because I've heard how Jazz feels about this. And so, his is the mic drop for real. But two words come to mind for me, and that's safety and access.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that Janiah said, even to be able to safely disagree with someone, to have a discourse and know that we'll both be able to go home at the end of it, or all of us can go to an event. Someone in the chat mentioned, we don't see voter registration or voting promoted in the Black community like we see, concerts and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So to be able to have safety and access for our family, we can stop dividing from each other and start adding to, we can also hopefully stop having these conversations, to have a conversation about a Black man being 6'4", and immediately in my mind, I'm like, well, did you have your mask on? And, were you smiling really big under your mask so people would not be concerned and potentially take your life? That's what can happen in my mind when we exercise our rights. What's possible when we exercise our rights to vote.
Thank you, Teesha. What about you, Jazz?
Well, what's possible when we vote is definitely having more people of Black and brown faces around the table to make decisions for everyone. Everyone suddenly will have a voice. I know it's kind of it's a little disappointing knowing what's happening now with Corona. In a way, Corona has been very beneficial because it's shown everyone who the true essential workers are. The people who make it possible for you to live and to eat and to get around, while everyone else who's not so essential sits home and just have the essential people be on the front line, be at risk, at the highest risk of everything, yet not get a fair wage. Let alone the people who are sitting home are getting more money than the person who's putting their life on the line. So it says what their life is worth. So I like for everyone to kind of just think back to before all of this stuff happened, before they said that Black Lives Matter, and to think like, well, wait a minute. If I didn't have to smile, if I didn't have to do all of these things to enhance myself, to make myself livable for other people, where would I be? What person would I be if I didn't have to change everything about myself to exist? And that for me is where voting can really change everything. I think Obama was a great person to have in the seat, but they still didn't let him have the full power. It was like, we're going to put him here, and we're going to and as soon as we can, we take the House away. And it's like, so. But we need to continue that message, because I mean, it was very disheartening for people. You know, everyone was about change and hope and all these things. It's still there. But we just have to know that, particularly after this president, that anything is possible. And that it's like, I always say, without George Bush, we would not have had Obama. And without Donald Trump, who knows what we can have next? Because suddenly people's eyes are open that maybe everything white isn't right. And that you don't have to be that smart to be president. And sometimes you can be president and be a complete idiot.
I told y'all Dad was gonna take the
church. And let's not forget that Obama dealt with Ebola, and 13,000 people died. I'm not taking numbers, but just look at where
we are taking numbers. We are.
Yeah. And he was bragging about that. And so I'm like, okay.
High five.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to seeing what a Trump can bring to 2020.
Yeah. Oh, you did. That was I have tingles on my arms.
That's just a mic drop.
It's going to be a mic drop. And
I would prefer if a sister had said that, okay?
Well, I mean, you had the delivery. You said the message. You said it. So we can stand in solidarity with you. Okay. And I think one of the things that I love about what all of you have shared is, and Jazz, I'm going to point this out. When you were talking about frontline workers, one of the things that you said when we first had our interview is like that those frontline people that came to your mind first were childcare workers and educators, were people who were not making healthy wages. And so I found it really interesting because a lot of work I do in Cincinnati is based on early childhood education. And so we were talking a lot around, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? How do we support women and men who are in this field doing this work, who sometimes only make $10.10 an hour and are yet expected to not only take care of other people's children and their own, but buy things for their classroom, buy things for everyone else. And so I'm really I just love that you uplifted that. And just that last piece that you landed on around the fact that before Corona started, it was clear that to us, to everyone that was Black and brown, well, I won't say brown, to everyone that was Black, that Black lives mattered, but that we have to sit in a space of imagination, of even undoing the colonialization that has been seeped into us and educated to us through birth, to really sit in this space of what is possible. Where could we be if we our own boundaries, right? If we said this is the way you have to treat me because this is the way I'm showing up, and I'm showing up with all of me, who would that person be and what would they look like? And so I love that. And I really appreciate Teesha and Janiah and Jazz, all three of you, and what you've brought to this, for you sharing some of your own personal stories, as well as all of the kind of curiosity that you're sitting in as you do the work to bring people to the polls and educate our communities. And so, yeah. So thank you all. And this, for everyone who's out there, thank you for your questions. We've been answering a few of them. To the point someone asked, and I'm sorry I missed the name, but asked that they said we don't see advertising in our communities like concerts and parties, but how do we get information to our communities about voting?
Yeah, that was Christian Swinton. I saw that specifically.
There you go. There we go. Oh, boom, it's back up. So could one of each of you add one thing that you would do to answer this question?
I think social media, what you guys have done today is it, because for our communities, a lot of the information that they're getting erroneously or factually is coming from social media. So being able to have this platform in this space to put that message forward is important. And then secondly, with everyone you talk to, and not just right now, as soon as somebody comes to you, like people who come to me and complain about something, the first question you should ask them is, did you vote for that? Did you vote at all?
Yeah, thank you. Jazz or Janiah, what do you all have? What's that one thing? And if you don't have one thing, it's good. We're good.
Well, I think definitely that talking about the election, even though people don't like to talk about politics, you don't really mix religion and politics. But the thing is, though, if you don't talk about politics, you will be mixing religion and politics.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, it's definitely important, like my walk with that friend of mine, just like, letting them know how they're not voting is going to affect their own lives. I think we should not only encourage them to vote, but I think I missed this. They need to make sure that they vote in the runoff. Just because your candidate is winning does not mean that in the runoff is where the turtle comes and wins.
Yeah.
So people need to know that they need to go to that runoff, or that person is going to lose. And it's hard because it's. But if there's anything that people need to know, that yes, they should vote, but they need to vote always. And as Janiah was saying, locally is more important than anything. Look at your property taxes. Look at who's controlling your votes.
Right.
Yeah, if there was one thing, that would be to vote constantly, and as particularly in the runoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I would say that the personal is political. So as Andre Lord says, I would just take that with you and take that in spaces. Like if you're having a discussion with someone and it doesn't sound political, be like, oh, like, have you considered voting? And just that messaging, wherever you can put it, just put it there when there's, that opportunity. And volunteer on local campaigns too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would. And the one thing that I would leave with is double tapping each of what you all said, but then also this piece of, we all know, or I know, and what my community knows, is the thing that comes around quickest is word of mouth.
Yeah.
So if you're having these conversations, Teesha, to your point earlier, with your family, with your friends, Janiah, if you're going with your grandma and your brothers and sisters, and Jazz, if you're pulling in friends that you know and having these conversations, that's how we actually spread this message. That's how we actually take it and make sure that it happens. Is we educate ourselves. And with educating ourselves, also educates people that we know and love and care about, and even people that we've never met before. It's an invitation into the conversation. So
there's some truth to this. I know how to get my people to vote. Free food and drinks, crab legs.
Exactly.
I'm saying Lil Wayne will be there.
Wait, hold on. You said crab legs, Key. I don't know where you're at, but I'm coming to where you're at. Because if there's crab legs, I will show up. But yes, free food, drinks, having a conversation, and everyone. In fact, there are usually community organizations that do community building, right? And so I will leave us there. And just again, thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for your energy and your presence and your work and your embodiment of this. So. Thank you all. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and thank you all and then move into this space where I share with everyone that this conversation is the first in the series. So thank you to each of our guests again. For all of you out there watching, we would not be here without you, without your energy. We want to hear your voices. We want to hear your stories uplifted. We appreciate your questions and your comments. And if you're feeling energized to join us and join any of these people who have shared with us their stories, then join the movement of Black Power building. And there is a story where there's a link that's going to come up. There it is, the bit.ly, Black at the Polls, where we share our stories around what we're experiencing. We want to hear why being a voter is also important to you and why that matters. So today's conversation will be immediately available on the Community Change Action social media site. There's a YouTube and a Facebook. The links will be shared. And after we have this conversation, our following one, where we talk about being Black at the polls, is August 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So our next event is going to be August 26th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. These are going to be part of a series. This will help you join our network. We'll have other info sessions and questions and other speakers back. Another way that you can take action today is by signing up to be a voter. And there's also a petition for Vote for Black Lives. We're also passing that around. We're raising our voices, and people are really having this conversation as well. And then the last thing that we have to offer is that there's a summit on August 19th from 1 to 5 p.m. that Community Change will be putting on. So save that date and time. You'll see some things posted on the Community Change Action website. Again, August 19th from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you to everyone again who's joined Facebook, joined us on YouTube today. And again, thank you for all of our guests, because you guys are a joy and a blessing. And I'm so grateful that I got to be here with you. So
Thank
we'll
you.
be back on August 26th. Thank you all. Yep, go vote. Bye, everyone.
Okay.